Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the ANH 2025 Online Learning Labs. My name is Shaylin Cullen, and I'm the technical manager for this session entitled RTI's Food Environment Toolkit and its use in market systems, programs designed to improve diets. This session is chaired by Valerie Flax, Tracy Mitchell, Tebehe Nigusi, and thank you for taking part in ANH 2025. We have a robust and interactive session today. Thanks so much. Over to you, Valerie.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. So as has just been said, this session is a learning lab about RTI's Food Environment Toolkit and how it can be used in market systems programs that are designed to improve diets. Okay, so here's just a quick overview of what we'll be doing during the learning lab today. We'll have a quick introduction of our team. We'll have a short session that covers some definitions about food environments and talks a little bit about existing tools and toolboxes that are used for measuring the food environment. We'll then spend some time talking about RTI's Food Environment Toolkit and the tools themselves and the process of using it. We'll go into some breakout sessions for each of the tools where people will have a chance to interact with the tools. I'll have a report back from the breakout sessions, and then we'll wrap up and talk a little bit about our lessons learned so far with using the toolkit in a few different countries. So I'm Valerie Flax. I'm a nutrition researcher at RTI. My co-presenters are Tracy Mitchell, who's a market systems and resilience expert, and Tebehe Nigusi, who is the Deputy Chief of Party for the Ethiopia Transforming Agriculture Project. And also I wanted to say Sinan Hatik, who also is with RTI, is helping us with polls and some of the coordination of the session. So if you have any questions about the polls or the mural board that we'll be using later, please message him in the chat. Okay, so now we'll dive in a little bit into some definitions and some sort of background about food environments and measurement of food environments. So first of all, just a general definition of what a food environment is. We can think about it as a context that might be a physical, economic, political, or sociocultural context where people engage with the food system and make decisions about buying, preparing, and consuming food. Food environments, we can think about them as being situated within the broader food system. So this diagram that comes from a paper by Shauna Downs and colleagues is based on the socio-ecological model. And so these different bands are representing different parts of the socio-ecological model. And you can see that food environments are kind of in the middle part between the individual factors and other sectors of influence and the broader socio and political environment. I think many of you may have seen this before, which comes from a paper by Chris Turner and colleagues that talks about different domains of the food environment. Their group looked at it and thought about it in terms of an external domain and a personal domain that interact with each other. So the external domain has 4 main elements: availability, prices, vendor and product properties, and marketing and regulation. And the personal domain has also 4 components: accessibility, affordability, convenience, and desirability. And I don't know how well you can read the stuff under each of those, but there are sort of definitions and components within each one of those elements. For us, we really used this framework to guide the development of our toolkit. We wanted to mention that there are quite a few food environment tools out there that exist. So our understanding is that Imana, which is part of ANH, funded a group of researchers to refine these tools that are in the left side of the slide, and they make up what is called a food environment toolbox. A lot of these tools already were there, but I think they did more work to test them out a bit more and make them a bit more user-friendly. There are a bunch of other tools listed on the right side of the slide, tools and methodologies, I would say. Photo voice and free listing aren't really tools per se, but more like methods. And some of these are tools that are used or were used by USAID market systems programs as part of required assessments that they had to do at the beginning of their programs. So all to say there are quite a few tools out there, and Tracy will talk a little bit later on about, okay, there's a lot of tools. Why do we need more tools? What was our sort of logic for coming up with additional tools?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Mitchell. I want to switch gears now and describe RTI's Food Environment Toolkit and talk about the toolkit, how the toolkit that we developed is in some ways different from other toolkits and how we've used the RTI toolkit so far. Okay, so on this slide, so what was the impetus for RTI to develop a new toolkit? There's more and more evidence that the importance of markets as a key place where households in low and middle income countries acquire food. In a recent study in 7 African countries, they found that 58% of rural households buy food in markets. And this ranged from 36% to 76% across those countries. And in general, it was higher in countries with urban areas and also during the lean season compared with the harvest season. But the conclusion is that a lot of low and middle income households rely on markets for their food instead of the notion that that people with limited income primarily produce their own food at home. So RTI is both a research institute and an implementing partner with USAID programs, including some of the Feed the Future agricultural market systems activities. In those Feed the Future programs, as many of you may know, one of the main outcomes is to increase the production of cash crops, such as coffee, that improve household incomes. But on the flip side of that, nutrition programming tends to focus on increasing consumption of nutritious foods without being linked to the food system. And so as an implementer of these Feed the Future programs, the problem we were coming up with is that we had a set of market systems activities, and then we had a set of nutrition activities that were not integrated and not really related to each other. And what we wanted to do was to have some sort of assessment and process so that the market system activities were addressing the nutrition goals instead of having the market activities just addressing economic goals. And so we wanted to have more of an integrated approach. And that's what we were really after with this toolkit. So to address this misalignment of market system and nutrition programming, we were able to get some internal funding within RTI to develop a food environment toolkit. Our goal was to facilitate the integration of agricultural market system and nutrition programming to improve the acquisition and consumption of nutritious foods by specific target groups. The way we set out to do that was to identify the food choice drivers among those target groups, to identify the opportunities or gaps in the market system, and then by collaborating with the market system actors to better align their businesses and activities to the consumer preferences that we identified through those earlier tools. So we developed and piloted the toolkit in Malawi using our internal funding, and we have subsequently adapted and used the toolkit in 2 USAID Feed the Future programs, one in Ethiopia and the other in Liberia. And then we also used it in one of the USAID humanitarian programs, ARIFSA, also in Ethiopia. So as Valerie mentioned, our toolkit is based on the Turner Food Environment Framework, and it includes 3 tools, which you see here on the left-hand side. And we'll describe each of these tools in more detail on some of the later slides. But just as a bit of an overview so you can understand how the tools relate to each other. The first tool is the Nutritious Food Selection Matrix, and we use this tool to identify the foods that the program should focus on. The second is a personal food environment assessment, which we conduct generally with women with children under 5 years of age. And we use that to gather information on the accessibility, affordability, convenience, and desirability of the specific foods, which aligns to the right side of the Turner framework. The third tool is an external food environment assessment that we use with market actors to assess the 4 areas in the external domain, which is shown on the left-hand side of the framework. Once the data are analyzed, we conduct stakeholder workshops to share the findings with market actors and work with them to identify solutions and opportunities for scaling up the acquisition and consumption of the nutritious foods through market system interventions. So the toolkit builds on research conducted by RTI and others and focuses on specific nutritious foods and food products. For example, chicken meat or small dried fish, instead of the general food groups or food environments in general. And this was a major innovation that provides actionable information for food vendors and businesses. The other innovation is working with market actors and other stakeholders, such as policymakers, for example, to identify actions that address consumers' challenges in acquiring nutritious foods. To develop these tools, we relied on prior RTI research focused on women's drivers of food choice and also on Turner's Food Environment Framework. We developed a qualitative tool for the personal domain and adapted a value chain style assessment for the external domain. We piloted each of these tools in Malawi and refined them before then using them in Ethiopia and Liberia. But in each case, we have to adapt the tools based on the specific foods that are selected by each program and also based on the local context. So the first step in our process is to use the nutritious food selection matrix. The matrix is completed by project staff or local experts and is validated with stakeholders to select priority nutritious foods or value chains to be strengthened through market system programs. In that food selection matrix, we make a row for each type of food, for example, eggs or cow milk. And then we assess each food based on the criteria listed here. The first criteria is whether the food can fill specific nutrient gaps. We use secondary sources of data for the country and program area to identify those nutritious gaps. We then ask the program team to determine if households mainly purchase the foods versus growing it for their own consumption. Since we're trying to identify market opportunities, we're looking for foods that are provided by the market actors. We also want to select foods that have good potential for increased productivity or domestic sales versus export or in addition to export. We assess whether each food has the potential to be transformed by market actors, for example, by using milk to make yogurt. And we also assess if growth in the value chain can lead to increased access or availability of the food. For example, meat products would be a yes in terms of being able to add value and increase incomes, while coffee production would be a no, because in the case that coffee is not consumed. And also whether the value chain includes opportunities for women. To improve the dietary diversity of target groups and address micronutrient deficiencies, The nutritious food selection matrix also provides a framework to evaluate a wide range of foods, such as poultry meat or ground nuts, in terms of their ability to fill nutrient gaps for target groups. For example, nutrient gaps like iron or calcium. Through this exercise, we're also identifying the acceptability to target consumers and market characteristics that would facilitate or hinder their development. Additional characteristics can be added based on the needs of the specific program. For example, climate adaptability, or other things that are important to a specific program or a specific country or target group. So this is an example of our food selection matrix for dairy that we completed for Ethiopia. This example is specifically for cow milk. And because there's a big variation from one region of Ethiopia to another, we had to complete this matrix for each region of Ethiopia. So the completed matrix is an internal document for our project teams, but it serves as a justification for which value chains a project should focus on to have nutrition outcomes. In Ethiopia, we were able to select the top 5 nutritious foods for each region to then develop during our 5-year market systems project. Once we select the foods, for example, cow milk, we then have to drill down and identify the different forms in which the milk was being sold. This informs the personal food environment assessment, which Valerie will talk about in the next slide. But you can see that, as you can imagine, the various types of products that are consumed in a country is very much context specific. And so we rely on our project teams to really help us come up with these lists. But I'll pass it over to you, Valerie, to take us through the personal environment.
Yeah, thank you. So for the personal environment or the personal domain assessment, as Tracy mentioned earlier, the main purpose is to measure those 4 components: accessibility, affordability, convenience, and desirability for specific foods within each of those selected value chains. We also measure availability, even though that's part of the external domain. We ask participants about their perceptions of availability as part of this personal domain assessment. So under the personal domain, we have 2 tools that we've used. We have a focus group discussion guide and a survey tool. And I might actually start by saying something about the survey tool and then go back to the discussion guide. So the survey tool asks for each value chain, what type of product. So the previous slide that Tracy was talking about showed, 7 different types of dairy products. So about dairy, we would ask which of those types of products do you purchase? And then for each one that they purchase, we would ask this other series of questions: frequency, place, quantity, and so on. For the focus group discussion, we have done it differently in different countries. When we originally developed it in Malawi, we use it for 2 purposes. One purpose was to help us refine the questionnaire, to get enough information to refine it, but the other purpose was to try to fill in kind of the hows and whys of what we find out from the survey. So it sort of had a mixed methods approach. In other contexts, so in Liberia and Ethiopia, for Ethiopia Transforming Ag, we were asked to collect information about orange flesh sweet potatoes, which are not commonly available in markets in either of those countries. So we felt like we needed to use the focus group guide to ask about those foods, actually buy some, prepare it, give people a chance to taste it, ask them what they like about the properties of it. So mostly measuring things related to desirability, and then whether they would have interest in purchasing it if it was available in the market. So we've used the focus group guide in different ways for different contexts. So as I mentioned before, there's, and I think Tracy mentioned this as well, for this example from Ethiopia, their project works in 5 different agroecological zones. So we conducted the assessment in each of those zones. We had a sample of 200 women with children under 5 in each zone, giving us a total sample of 1,000 women. And so for each type, for example, for dairy products, we have this list that the project team has come up with in terms of the types of dairy products that are available in markets. And then we ask this list of questions for each one of these products. A piece of this questionnaire is based on a drivers of food choice tool that has been validated in some African countries. And then in addition, we have some overarching questions about food expenditures overall and specifically for dairy and their market access. Okay, so now I'll turn it over to Tbeje and he'll talk about the external domain.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Tbeje. So before directly dive into external food environment assessment, I think it's worthwhile to start with the purpose. So the purpose of this external food domain component was to identify factors related to the supply of nutritious food, that is availability, price, vendor practice, and product properties, as well as marketing and regulation. To be more responsive to women and children, especially for food choice drivers. So in other words, the external domain focuses on post-production intervention necessary to provide nutritious food to consumers. While we are doing this external food environment assessment tool, the external domain considers some questions like, for instance, how does availability affect this procurement and consumption of identified nutritious food? And as well as how does price affect procurement? Because the price range is quite different, as Valerie mentioned, in those 5 agroecological zones. And also we also deep dive and also look at how do vendor and product properties, including type of food vendors, opening hours, as well as the service provided. And also this really affects procurement and consumption of identified nutritious food. And finally, how does the market regulation, including those promotional information, branding, marking, advertising, sponsoring, labeling, and policies affect those procurement of consumption of identified nutritious food? So to understand those scenarios, the external food environment study team mapped the value chains by cluster to identify more than 366 key informant representing wholesalers, retailers, vendors, processors, and regulatory agencies to find out, how those things are really affected by those factors that I mentioned earlier. So I think for the interest of time, I'm not going to through the external food environment assessment impact on each selected commodities, but I will focus on poultry. So in case of poultry that we did, we have seen availability, price, vendor properties, product properties, as well as regulation and marketing. So in case of regulation, the regulation that do exist focus on large scale producers, and little attention have been given for small scale producers and smaller markets. So the project has got an informed interventions moving forward after having this assessment. So after having this assessment report, we had stakeholder meeting. So we present the findings for the multi-stakeholder platform, which has been gathered in different domains. For example, stakeholders like retailers, wholesalers, processors, regulatory agencies were part of the stakeholder meeting. So The regional experts presented the external food environment findings at stakeholder workshops in each clusters, as Valerie mentioned, in 5 clusters, and also to link the personal and external domains and identify actionable recommendations at the market system level. So this is one of the approach that we followed to have like a bottom-up approach to really like, uh, having like informed decision while we are like identify intervention areas. Next. So I think after having these tools, like if we are not going to translate into project intervention, it doesn't really like mean like we are using it. We are using these tools and also adapt some of the very important key element out of these studies. The main purpose of this food environment assessment is for selected nutritious food within each project cluster under our project called Ethiopian Transforming Agriculture, to use information to design market system activity and promote consumption on nutritious food. For example, in case of availability, in terms of availability, as a market system project, Ethiopian Transforming Agriculture adopt a private sector-led approach to address food security challenges. The project focuses on increasing availability of food by supporting private sector actors through targeted grant mechanism. So these grants are delivered through various modalities, including outgrowing scheme, which are designed to boost agricultural production and productivity, which ultimately increase availability of food. So one of the strategic involves partnering with promising agribusiness and producers to strengthen value chain and improve market linkage. For example, the project is currently working with potential pullet growers in terms of poultry, and who are really integrated to an outgrowing model. So those pullet growers connected to like smaller size outgrowers to scale up this egg production, so that meanwhile we also increase availability and also support like consumers to really access more food on the market. So in terms of price, based on the findings we get from these foundational studies, transforming agriculture is collaborating with market actors, especially aggregators such as milk collectors, egg hub actors, and to enhance the efficiency of agricultural value chains. Vis-a-vis, by doing so, these aggregators play a central role in collecting, sorting, and distributing products to smallholder farmers. So by supporting the small milk and egg aggregators, the project aims to streamline the supply chain. So aggregator serves as a bridge between between producers and urban markets, reducing number of intermediaries in between, so that we create like a direct linkage between consumers and producers. So we are also doing, we are also having benefit for this project in terms of product properties. Uh, Based on the study output, Transforming Agriculture designed and encourage quality-based payment system, which really support like to minimize adulteration, while we are also looking for different quality parameters while buying and collecting milk products from producers. We also benefited from like dealing with these vendor properties. We give training for vendors in hygiene on their space, and transforming agriculture, working with a wide range of small and micro enterprises to improve their working premises. And we also closely working through the government regulatory bodies, so that they label it as green, as a traffic light approach, green, orange, and red. So those greens are certified for their quality premises, and also orange are also like, approved by the regulatory, and again with cross follow-up, mentorship, and etc. So the red are also like subject to be like, improve their facility without any certification. So we are working on those spaces, and also transforming agriculture is really benefited from those tools that has been used by RTI in different places. Next. So the next session will be the breakout session. So we will divide ourselves into 3 groups. The first group will deal with nutritious food selection matrix. I will lead that group. And the second group, group 2, will deal with the personal domain tools that will lead by Valerie. And also the third group will deal with external domain tools, which led by Tracy. So this breakout session has instructions. In each breakout session, we will briefly review tools adapted for specific countries. Next slide. So briefly review a tool adapted for a specific country, and we will also, in each group, we will also pick a country or a different food and practice adapted, whether it's personal or external tools, or filling out the food selection matrix by using the tools which has been explained so far. So finally, after doing that exercise, finally, we will discuss the tool using the following parameters. So finally, we come up and present for the team what is really the value addition of using this tool in the program, and what are some challenges you foresee while using this tool. How could these challenges be addressed? And also, we will also look at how would you use these tools in your workplaces. So we will also choose like a group member to report back and also present the findings, the exercise for the entire team. So thank you. So I think the presentation will follow the same sequence. So maybe group 1 will present like all those 3 questions. The first one is, what is the value addition of using this tool in a program? And the second question was, what are some of the challenges you foresee with using this tool? How could those challenges be addressed? And the third question was, how would you use this tool in your workplace? So from our group, Margaret was volunteer. So I give a chance for Margaret to share.
From our team, what we found to be valuable, or what of value the tool would add to our program. Number one, we noted that it has to be completed in a team, and the prompting is done per each specific commodity, and therefore it has potential for nutritious foods prioritization, and also seeing bottlenecks along the way, because number one, you're not doing it alone, and you're going to go through the same process for each and every food that you identify. So that was one of the values that we saw, or a combination of the values that we saw in summary. Do I proceed to the next? In relation to the challenges that we foresaw, and I will speak in regard to one particular question that was asking the potential to advance women's economic empowerment for the food that we had chosen, which is milk. I think what we realized is that for some of the foods, we might not have a yes or no response that is very absolute, and therefore we might end up with some gray areas which may not be necessarily resolved by the tool that we have, or the tool that we are using. So yeah, and then also we noticed that for the tool to work, the team needs to be context sensitive. I think, again, going by that and how women participate in various economic activities in different regions, I think that's where now we concluded that the team would want to be very context sensitive. And then also someone mentioned that you would also need to be very well versed with issues so that you can have a very good analysis of the situation at hand. And then finally, in relation to how we would use the tools in our work, I think one person mentioned research, and it was interesting to note that number one, they would use it with their students so that they can use it as an on-job training sort of tool. And then again, also someone mentioned that they would use it at the beginning of the design of a given project, to give like an initial thought process, going to select more nutritious foods along the way. Yeah, and then also finally, someone said that they would use the tools to identify foods that can improve nutrition, household income, and acts as a channel to empower women. Yeah, that is it from our group. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Margaret, for being volunteer and also leading all this thing, typing all this thing, and also for your nice presentation. So the next one will be the personal domain tool. So Valerie, who is going to present from your team?
I would just say our group, we went quickly over the qualitative tool that we had, a piece of the qualitative tool that we used in Malawi, and we then spent more time looking at the questionnaire and trying to adapt the questionnaire for the personal domain. We picked cow meat as the commodity, and we tried to think through some of the types of forms in which cow meat would be bought and how we would adapt the questionnaire for that type of food. So in terms of the value addition, the things people mentioned were that it could standardize measuring food environments in different countries. So it would be kind of a way of standardizing measurement. Somebody mentioned that the qualitative tool can inform the design of the questionnaire. It would give information on the foods that people are consuming within that type of that commodity or value chain. Kind of this two-stage process of using the qualitative and the survey can help you pick up on things that you might have forgotten. So it kind of could give you information from two different directions. And then the tool has questions about desirability and accessibility. Especially, I think desirability is one of those areas there are fewer tools measuring that. So this helps with that. In terms of challenges, people mentioned different types of bias, possible social desirability bias, and also possible bias in the responses if the response options are not well enough adapted in the questionnaire. In terms of how people said they could use this tool, one person mentioned using it in local communities, and another mentioned using it for gender research. So yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody in our group. Thanks everybody for their participation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Group 2. So the last but not the least, Group 3, which is external domain tools, which was led by Tracy. Tracy, who is going to present from your team?
Tracy was very wonderful. She did an amazing job helping us understand this tool, and especially vendor characteristics and how really to ask questions in the market, and also some of the potential challenges you'll get, especially with market regulation. So I'll just go straight to number one. We identified some of the value addition of using this tool. One is that it can help us inform what foods to grow and develop so that they are available in the market. It can also help promotion of new nutritive new products. It can also create vendor awareness. Also, we saw because of the regulation bit in Module 4, it can also influence food safety. And also, this tool can also be used to inform policy and practice. Also, it can help us understand some of vulnerabilities that we have in the various food value chains from the data. And finally, it can also increase food availability and access of nutritious products in the market through the gaps that we identify. Then we go to number 2. Some of the challenges that were identified include that you need knowledge of vendors, and sometimes you can have resistance to participate in this work. Then to scale up to large population centers or regions, it was identified as a potential challenge. Then understanding the sampling frames. I think this also came up when Valerie was asked, how many vendors do you need? And some of the informal sectors are complicated. Then also getting vendors to talk while they're also selling in the market was an issue. Then it seems to be costly where vendors are many for one product like eggs. The other challenge is the focus is on only one food value chain, which is limiting. Then the fact that you need a deep understanding of key nutritious food value chains. can also have an impact in a food system. I think this last one belongs to the down one. I think so. Number 3 was on how you use this tool in your work. 1, you can use it to identify potential for revival of traditional food items, such as uncultivated foods. You can use it to fill gaps in nutrition and food safety. You can also use it to design nutrition interventions for resilience. Yeah, and I think even within this, we also discussed a lot beyond these 3 questions. So thank you so much, Tracy, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. That was an amazing report out. It was a great group. Back to you, Tobejé.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, for your amazing report back. So can we have next slides?
All right, thank you, Toolkit. So, yeah, so we wanted to do a little bit of a wrap up and talk about some of our lessons learned that we've gathered from our experiences of using the tools in a few programs. So, and then we'll have a chance for more questions. These are kind of our big lessons learned that we've gathered from creating and using these tools in a few projects. One is related to the target selection of foods. What we found is that programs start out with having really long lists of possible target foods or target commodities. And so it takes a lot of time and effort to fill out the nutritious food selection matrix for all of those. Then within each food that's selected, we still have to, work with them to pick which specific types of food within that commodity we're going to focus on. So I guess there's sort of 2 parts to this. One is, trying to get the team to be a little more selective in the commodities. And then the second is even to try to be a little more selective in the food products that are within that commodity, because you see in the personal food environment questionnaire, for each one of those types of food within the commodity, you have to ask 10 or 12 questions. So if you have 7 different types of food under dairy, then you're asking those questions, 7 times. So that it takes a lot of time. So trying to get a bit more targeted is one thing that we've learned would be useful. And it could really be targeted more on like the commodities, the project, not only the commodities, but the types of food within that they think they want to focus on, so that it's, not collecting data on everything. We also had a few thoughts about, or lessons learned related to the personal domain. For the focus group guide, I think I've already said my opinion. In my opinion, I like it better when we do it as kind of a mixed method approach. And, we use the focus group guide to help us design the questionnaire and to kind of fill in the hows and whys of what we're learning from the questionnaire. The way we originally designed that in Malawi, we had various participatory components to it, and they didn't all work that well. So if we wanted to use that again, we would probably need to, adapt it further and pilot it more. And then in terms of the questionnaire for the personal domain, we would like to do cognitive testing on some parts of it if we have the opportunity to use it again, just to ensure that understanding is there of the questions, are understood how we intend, and so on. And lastly, in terms of stakeholder engagement, Vijay talked earlier about, how stakeholders were engaged in Ethiopia transforming agriculture. But one thing that we've kind of learned is that it would be helpful to get stakeholders engaged in the process even earlier. So trying to get them engaged already when we're at the stage of nutritious food selection, so that, especially if it's a donor-driven project, making sure that the donor is on board with the selection of those foods and the process that we're using to do it, and then having them be engaged throughout the data collection, and so that they kind of know what's coming, is something that we also have seen could improve the process. Yeah, and so with that, I think I will open it up to questions, and we can use the last part of the time for questions. If people have questions for any of us, feel free to either raise your hand or unmute or put your question in the chat.
Hi, this is Gargi Obligraner. I had a question about, I mean, after post USAID, whatever has happened, I'm just wondering in terms of using the food environment toolkit beyond going to academicians and students, etc., that came up in the group discussions. Could you share a little bit about which organizations, apart from development sector, could use these kind of toolkits?
One of the things that we hoped would happen in the Ethiopia project was that the personal domain data that we collected, we thought that would be very effectively used as market information for the various food production companies. Like, for example, milk processors sharing that data about what those women said about dairy products. We thought that would be useful for them. We have shared that with them, and they seem to be interested in it. Some of them have acted on it. It would be nice if that data was then, or the process was integrated into like a commercial service, like a market service. I don't think we're close to that yet, but we did receive positive feedback that the personal domain in particular was useful for private sector companies as market research.
Yes, I was curious, listening to some of the challenges or lessons learned that you guys presented to us at the end here, particularly around that long list of nutritious foods to be that included. I know, like under USAID Spring, they had an activity in the beginning where you could look at your nutrition team works at like looking at identifying the nutritious crops or foods to focus on. And then the ag team also did their own like initial preliminary vetting. And I was wondering before you even I didn't see the second tool, but wondering if there's even like initial step there where we're looking at these nutritious foods. The nutritionists are coming with this perspective, but then the ag team can come in and say, this isn't feasible, this is not in the zone, blah, blah, blah. And that would give you a first layer cut of foods to narrow it down. And just was wondering if you guys did that and still had that very, very long list. But yeah, I was just curious because that first step reminded me a lot of the spring tool, slightly different questions and stuff, but similar ideal.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. I mean, I think Tracy could speak to that. I think especially for Ethiopia Transforming Ag, they had different types of priorities. And so, I mean, I think that's partly why the list was long, but I don't know, Tracy, if you want to jump.
Yeah, to complete that food selection matrix, we did have the nutrition team and like the agronomy or the livestock production team work together to do that. So when they completed it, I think they were all on board with the selections, but it was still a pretty long list. And what we didn't do at that stage that I think would have been really helpful is to take that list to both USAID and the government, and have them, like, if there was a food they were totally against, they would have knocked it off the list. And I'll just give the example of orange flesh sweet potatoes, because we spent a lot of time including orange flesh sweet potatoes in our assessment. And when we got to the final stage and presented it back to the stakeholders, the government of Ethiopia basically said, no, you're not working on orange flesh sweet potatoes. And they really weren't going to negotiate about that. So if we had asked them earlier, we would have known that. So I think that's one example. I don't think it's a matter of the nutrition versus the agronomy teams. It's more of the external stakeholders that we're accountable to. But Tveje, you may have other thoughts.
Yeah, I think as you already explained well, Tracy, but in the meantime, within diverse geography like the lowland, highland setup and etc., like those commodities are again diverse on those localities. And in the meantime, for instance, if you look at orange flesh sweet potato, it is more of like a donor-driven kind of initiatives, but not like on commercial basis and etc. So that's why at the beginning they really resist, you can't get it in good quantity. People, they don't really know the benefit and etc. And also they said like it will take like extra mile to really adapt for such commodities. So as you said, it's not all about like the internal staff. The internal staff is working in collaboration, but the external stakeholders are the one who finally sit down and look at those commodities at large and also come up with like small groups of food items.
I will say, though, that this tool was especially effective. Like, we did have those external stakeholders. They would ask us, like, why didn't you include this food or that food? Like they're sort of like, their pet project kind of food. And having gone through this exercise, we were able to provide really solid justification for why we didn't select certain foods. And so that was, I think, it was as valuable to not do things as it was to do things sometimes.
I think I have a question maybe for any of the ANH organizers. Several people have asked, how they could get access to the tools, and it's really on RTI to package them. We've had conversations for Tracy, especially Tracy and I have been having conversations for a while about how we could do that. But I guess my question for ANH is, once we have a tool, once we have it packaged and available for users, how could we kind of let that be known to the ANH community?
Well, two things. One, we'd love to share this on the Support Center for Agriculture and Nutrition Research portal, which is called Scanner. And I'll put a link to that in the chat. It's just a resource on the ANH Academy website for researchers to find new tools, sources of data, and it walks you through the research process. And we'd love to link it there along with the other resources we provide. And you can reach out to us and we could be happy to share an announcement in one of our newsletters. As Sunita just said in the chat, yes, we'd love to share it in the newsletter, and potentially also in one of our research communities meetings as well, which are smaller groups of members focused on specific topics. We meet monthly, talk about new research. So I'll paste a link to Scanner in the chat for folks who are interested, and also research communities while I'm at it.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, so this is good for us because it's also just a good impetus for us to get it packaged so that it can be used by other people.
Well, I just put in the chat, but I think this kind of really in-depth preliminary work also saves you from including a bunch of questions which you learn have nothing to, are not needed in that particular setting. So streamlining.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as I said in my my lessons learned, I mean, it would be nice to streamline even more, so that we're not asking, if only like 2% of the people buy powdered milk, like, do we really need to ask all the questions about powdered milk? Kind of thing, so that we're really like honing in on the specific forms of the commodity that, the project is gonna put its effort on. Yeah. All right, well, I want to just thank everybody who joined the session and who has stayed until the end. We really appreciate everybody coming and learning with us, and we will do our best to package up the tools and get them in a user-friendly form. And we'll reach out to ANH once we have that ready so that we can make it available to other people in the research and practice community. So thanks everybody, and we hope to see you in some other sessions.